real C-Rock?
Welcome to Bondcast, James Bondcast, the only show that dedicates itself to the critical and comical dissection of every movie in Ian Fleming's 007 film series, one episode a month for 24 consecutive months, where we will be discussing one James Bond film at a time in chronological order leading up to the eventual release of the 25th entry in the James Bond series, which as of this date is still unnamed. My name is Colin Shaw, and today's episode will be focused on The Spy Who Loved Me, the 10th entry into the 007 series, and the third outing of Sir Roger Moore as James Bond. I am, of course, joined by my two Bond-obsessed co-hosts, Harris McCabe.
What's up?
And Matt McGregor.
What's cooking, good looking?
Let's get started. What did you guys think of this movie? What did you guys think of that intro?
That was nice. That was some great reading.
Yeah.
I have to say, Matt has done a great job in the past, but you can also read, apparently.
You were great at reading.
They did tests in school to see if I knew the letters and the way that and the syllables and stuff.
A little shout out to the Texas public school system.
Yes, Texas public school system coming through.
Guys, I think I want to shout out that this podcast is moving up and up, and technologically, we were able to hear the song for the first time, and that song was, of course, created by the one, the only, C-Rock. How you doing over there?
What up?
Hey, did you watch this movie?
Hell no.
Oh, he didn't watch it. I thought he might say something different.
One day.
One day.
Yeah, one day.
No.
C-Rock will watch one of these movies.
Let's go. Let's dive in.
Let's dive
We
in.
ever blasted your SoundCloud? Do you want to shout that out?
Sure.
What is it? SoundCloud?
CDOTROCC.
You actually have to write D-O-T?
Yeah, because you can't put a dot in a URL.
Oh, that's good to know.
But C-Rock, just like C dot rock.
C dot rock.
Oh, it's URL? I always thought it was a guy named Earl.
Earl. Ew.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
Dad jokes already? It's
I'm
early
so
in the
sorry.
podcast.
What did I do?
Well, another great beat as usual. Let's talk about this movie because there's some interesting, just in general, this is 1977 now.
Yes.
A great year.
Yeah, a great year. Great. I mean, none of us were alive, I don't think, at that point.
No.
Thank
Not even
God.
Me.
Not even a twinkle in your daddy's eye.
I was probably a twinkle in my daddy's eye,
Oh.
but interesting changes in the franchise though, because this is the first movie that isn't produced by Harry Saltzman. He was bought out. He sold his stake because of
For $20 million, right?
Yeah, for unrelated financial problems. He was making some other bad investments, but so now this is Cubby Broccoli is the sole producer.
I was about to ask you if we were comfortable calling him Cubby, because as we've all read, that is like his nickname in real life, but I'm sure we all assumed that people who knew him called him that.
Only his closest confidants, which I feel like at this point with this podcast, we are.
Yeah.
In the first few episodes, it's Albert, but now
Right,
I feel like we've earned Cubby.
Yeah.
And
hopefully by the end we'll be calling him Cubs.
With a Z.
Yeah.
So for a little perspective, Man with the Golden Gun was our last Bond film. That underperformed, and there were for the first time, there was some doubts about the franchise. It was sort of the first disappointment they'd had. And instead of getting tight, Cubby doubled down.
Yeah,
invested
he
more
spent
than-
the most he spent.
Yep, increased the budget.
Which was what?
It was $14 million budget on this. It paid
Which
off.
in today's money, that's like $1 billion.
It's a lot of money. So $14 million was quite a bit back then, and they'd grossed $185 at the box office. So it was a bet that paid off for him. Also, a distinguishing feature of this one is that it was not based on an original Ian Fleming story. They took the title
Yeah.
from a novel. Which, does anybody know anything about the novel and why they didn't use it?
I heard that Ian Fleming hated it. He thought
he wouldn't print it in paperback because he didn't want it to
It was
sell.
only after he died that it became popular.
One of the reasons he didn't like it was because it was unique in that it was told from the perspective of a Bond girl, and Bond himself doesn't make an appearance until chapter, I think, 10 of a 14-chapter novel. So he basically comes in the final third and is a minor character. So Ian Fleming said, yes, go ahead and use the title, The Spy Who Loved Me. It's a great fucking title. But he said you can't use any elements of the plot. They did sort of cheat because two of the henchmen in the book were similar to the two henchmen that we have in this film.
In appearance only, right?
But everything else was different. So they basically invented the story from scratch.
Which is the first time they did that.
Yeah, and they went through. I think there was like 6 or 7 writers that they were trying to that at various times worked on this project before Richard Maybaum, who had done, I think at this point 7 or 8 Bond movies, adapted them. He ended up being the final writer with Christopher Wood doing a pass as well.
Yeah, and they got all the like good people that they worked with before. They got a director who had done You Only Live Twice. They got a cinematographer who had done some cool stuff.
Yep, they had the DP was Claude Renoir, who was the grandson of Pierre Auguste Renoir, the artist, and the nephew of Jean Renoir, the famous filmmaker. They got Ken Adams back doing production design. Ken Adams killing it again. The production design is insane in this. And Louis Gilbert was the director who did You Only Live Twice and ended up doing this movie, and then I think he did Moonraker as well. They were originally going to bring Guy Hamilton back, who had done several Bond movies. He left this to go do Superman, and then that didn't work out either. And he got replaced by Richard Donner. So So he went from having 2 great movies going on in 1977 to ending up with none.
Yeah.
I'm blanking. I can't think of his name. The director of American Werewolf. Oh, John Landis.
Yeah, John Landis.
He did a pass on this script. Yeah.
So everyone worked on this script
Do you
at one point.
Do you ever just kind of like take like a little stance and kind of like put your hands on your hips and lift your chest up a little bit and just like be like, da, 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 da.
That's actually how I pee.
Yeah. Oh, I also that's good. I also
with song every time.
I have a good.
I've been in a public restroom with you, and it's really weird.
If there's somebody else around, I just tend to hum it quietly, but
just screaming.
I have a
like
good story
50
actually.
people around.
When I was in 4th grade, they made us watch the movie Free Willy. It was like a movie day or whatever. Yeah. The teacher was hungover or whatever. And do you remember the song that plays in the credits at the end of that movie? It's a Michael Jackson song.
Yeah.
So I had to use the restroom, and I went in there, and I was at the urinal, and I started like singing that song to myself, only for a friend of mine to come out of the stall, and like I didn't know he was there.
That is totally the Free Willy song, though.
It was really embarrassing.
It works on so many levels.
Freeing Willy.
Yeah, I freed my Willy, exactly.
Willy. Yeah. The other interesting thing about this whole story and the movie is that they were also involved in a lawsuit at this time with another group of people who owned one single James Bond movie. What was the one? It was. They ended up remaking it as Never Say Never Again with Sean Connery,
which is a remake of Thunderball.
Title?
Yeah. Was it Thunderball?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a remake of Thunderball.
It was a remake.
That's
of
the one with
so,
the flying saucer boat.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was somebody else who had part ownership of that story, and because Spectre and Blofeld were in that story, that who owned Blofeld as a character was up for dispute. And so originally Blofeld was the scripted villain of this, and then when they realized it was going to be a lot of legal trouble, and they weren't sure where it stood, they just said, just make it somebody else. So the villain we get in here is Karl Stromberg, who is basically a Blofeld stand-in.
Yeah, it would have made more sense with Blofeld, because like, why Blofeld? I mean, Stromberg has like a lot of employees, but like, what is their motivation?
Yeah,
like, what are they doing? Even there's a part when well, it's too far down the line, but like, if you think about all his characters, but Jaws doesn't talk, so I mean, you're not going to get a lot of what his motivation really is, besides that he's paid to kill, which that rounds out his character functionally. But the other people that work for Stromberg, it's like, what do they see their future being here? Like,
Aquaman. Better to be on the Aquafort than in the nuclear apocalypse.
Maybe they were just like, he has a really great fish logo, like I'm
The
really
logo
drawn
was
to the
pretty cool.
logo.
I really like the logo actually. Reminded me of kind of like a chessboard almost.
Yeah.
Doesn't it have that like black and white?
Yeah, it's like a black and white fish scales. The fish is always pointing up.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
circular.
Like in life.
Maybe that was part of the brainwashing.
It's circular,
You come to
just like the
Strongberg Industries. Note that the
Spectre
fish is
logo.
always looking up.
is always is also circular, so it was like an easy swap there. Just like get rid of the
Right,
Spectre
yeah.
logos, turn them into Stromberg logos, and we're off to the races.
But Stromberg could have been like a number in the Spectre.
Yeah, exactly. But using Spectre at all would have opened them up to this lawsuit, and they
Yeah,
weren't sure how
exactly.
they were going to fare, so they just basically ditched it.
I kind of like that they ditched it. Changed things up a little bit. Or they couldn't even mention Spectre, I guess,
Right.
too, right?
They don't go back to Spectre until like Daniel Craig,
Until
right?
Spectre.
I,
yeah.
I think I believe that the property was still sort of in dispute until then. I don't.
Well, they
think
made the
What-
Never Say Never Again.
What
right?
made the dispute end? Did someone pass away or something?
I don't know. I think we'll probably get to that in a later Bond film because I believe that was
We'll have to
right
talk
up until
about it
the
at-
Daniel
at
Craig
Spectre.
era. I think they still weren't sure if they could use him. So
I have some morbid trivia about this movie that I thought was interesting. This was
that ought to lighten things up.
this was the last movie that Elvis Presley saw. before
Oh,
he died.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw that. Yeah.
Not a bad one. This
He
is
died, like,
also
4 or 6 days later.
this is
Yep.
also the last movie that who are the Lyle and the Menendez brothers' parents saw.
They were watching.
They
this.
didn't see the entire thing because they got interrupted by shotguns. But
They were
this
on their
was-
couch watching this movie on a VCR, and their
Wow.
their children came in and blew them away.
So listen to the rest of the podcast to find out if we think it's worth it.
Find out if we make it to the end of this one.
Great, we've added some tension here.
All right, let's talk about the gun barrel sequence.
It's a new version.
Oh yeah, it's the new. This is the bell bottoms one. This
Yeah.
is what I've been waiting for.
Yep.
That
Yep.
tuxedo with bell bottoms.
It's the first time Bond's in a tuxedo.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is, I think we had a previous Connery. The original Connery movies were done by his stunt double, and then they changed it to the Connery version that we saw for a few of them because they had an aspect ratio change in the film stock they were using. This is again, they had one that they had done for Roger Moore 2 movies in a row, and they re-recorded it this time for the same reason. They had changed film stock. And this is a version of him in a tux with some real flared pants there.
So this one is wider, right?
Yeah. So just to
Yeah.
explain aspect ratio, if people don't know, so
Google.
the previous movies, like movies in the past, were more square shaped because TVs were that size, or not even because of TVs. It was just like the film standard.
Well, I mean, like it would have been projected onto a screen, so it's like whatever. It's
the
it's based on what you're
trends
shooting it on.
During that
film-wise.
time, were changing, and movies began getting wider and wider. Like Lawrence of Arabia is like in CinemaScope,
CinemaScope,
and so they needed to change that opening because it was done the old flat way. There's
Yeah.
flat and scope, and so they needed to redo it. One thing I'm excited about is that we don't really have to talk about this for the next 4 movies because they reused this one, I think, through to the end of his
Yep.
Bond.
Yeah, they didn't
Bond
change it
double.
again. Yep.
Yeah.
So cold open?
Yeah, this is one of the best cold opens, I think.
Oh, the parachute.
I mean, it's okay. We'll get to that. It
Yeah.
starts with what?
Triple
the,
X.
the submarine, right?
Oh yeah, it starts off with the submarines.
Which is
Oh,
that's
yeah,
probably the
you get
lamest part.
everything in this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. So it shows the submarine getting swallowed up, but we don't actually
know.
see that. We just see the guy look through the periscope, and he's like, "My
Oh
God!"
my God!
Yeah, that's
then
pretty cool.
Then we find out that we find out I think then that there's Russians and the U.S. have
Oh,
both
because it's a
lost
Russian sub that's
Yep.
lost, right? Yeah. So then they cut.
No,
they,
it's the
It's
Russians
Russians
and,
and
the
the
Brits.
British.
The Brits are the
The
ones
US
that
are
get
the ones
eaten in
get-
the beginning,
yeah,
or
right.
we don't know what happens to them,
Right.
Because that's why he says "Oh my God" in English, because they're talking in English to each other in that
But
part.
yeah,
Right.
but we
Yeah.
learn that both the Russians and the British are both they're summoning their secret agents.
They've lost submarines,
And we
nuclear
see this
submarines.
very suave, Bond-looking Russian spy type guy
In
in
bed.
bed with a beautiful woman, and he gets the call on the radio. They get the call on the bed. Triple X, come in. Your country needs you. Blah blah blah. And he rolls over like he's going to answer it, and then the woman leans over him and responds, and we find out that Triple X, the super secret agent from Russia, is actually a beautiful woman played by Barbara Bach.
yes.
Right. Then we see the guy. He's like, "Oh, I got a mission of my own,
Yep.
and I'm going to Austria."
Yes, that's right.
And then we
Cut
cut
to
to a
Austria.
little log cabin on a mountain
Wait,
in Austria.
before that, we cut to M and Moneypenny, and he says,
Oh God. yeah.
Moneypenny, where's 007? And she says, "He's on a mission, sir." And he says, "Well, tell him to pull out immediately."
Guess what kind of mission Bond was on?
Yeah, that's one of the some of the jokes to me in this one don't land, and some of them are kind of weird. Like, what about when Jaws kills the guy and he's next to a phone booth that has an out of order sign on it? So he takes the out of order sign off the phone booth and puts it on the dead guy.
Bond just puts like a little.
Is that even funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this movie. I mean, we'll get to it at the end, but really, this is the culmination of like, for me, Roger Moore. Like, this is, he had the 2 movies to kind of practice. He got to this movie, and it's great.
This is peak Moore.
And it's peak Moore, but they pepper it with these jokes. They try to make it funny, and then whoever saw this movie, or like the makers of this movie, they said, the best part are these cheesy jokes. We need more of these.
Right.
And then going forward, it's just the downward slope of cheesiness. So we'll get to that.
But I think some of the jokes land better when they start like doing more of them. The jokes in this one, like
they're few and far
It's
between.
like they're kind of trying too hard when they have them, and they're not really. But
this joke
the
was
pulling
good.
out joke was good, especially because it's also just great advice for him in general. That's,
right, yeah, and it's not Bond saying it, and so that's like kind of. But anyways, then we cut to him,
Slam
and he
cut,
is of course in bed with a woman in the little log cabin, and then he gets a call on some.
No, his watch, the little
his watch.
printout.
It's it's like a
label
maker.
maker.
Yeah. His watch has a label maker in it,
It's like
which must have
Bond.
been incredibly impressive in 1977.
It's so bad now.
So now he's got to rush off to save the world, and the woman that he's with immediately picks up her radio and says, "Oh, he's just left," and they're like, "We're ready for him."
She
and
says,
it's all these.
But James, I need you. And he turns around and says, so does England.
Of course.
So does England.
So bad.
So he
there's-
hops on his skis because he's got to ski away from this place.
He's in
Because why was he there ever, anyways? But
He's in a bright yellow.
yeah, he's in
ski
bright yellow.
suit.
He has a really big backpack on for some reason. It must have all his stuff in it or something.
His spy stuff.
So then, like about 10 Russian ski guys start chasing him. We get a ski chase.
There's a pretty
James
good
Bond-
ski chase too.
Oh,
We
I would say it's like shot really well. The only part that bugs me, and it's probably the same thing that bugged you guys, are the close-ups of him, where you could tell it's like the poor man's process thing going on.
But it was better than to compare it to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which also had a great ski scene, but the poor man's process was used extensively in that one. This time they don't use it that much. They mostly use stunt performers from a distance,
Yeah.
and it works a lot better. They only have a couple of close-ups. Most of it is shot at a distance. They're skiing backwards.
Yeah,
he
it's
turns
good.
his ski pole into a gun and
Like-
shoots apparently a flaming bullet into the guy's chest because
Well-
it lights on fire in the guy's chest.
And
It
doesn't that
explodes.
death come back later?
Yes.
That is the guy.
Yeah.
And
that's the guy.
it also there's like they're playing the Bond theme, but there's like a little bit of a disco.
A 70s,
Oh yeah,
like-
and
wow.
it's got hella cowbell in it. Like
Yeah,
the cowbell is just going.
If we
It's
could
like
find that
Blue
song-
Oyster Cult level, except there's more pauses, but it's like
know what?
that level of cowbell.
Yeah, it's and there's also a really stupid whooshing sound effect when some guy does a jumping ski flip that's like corny, like the slide whistle on the car. Yeah. But anyways, the stunt is great, and they like ski through these little like snow tunnels, and it's pretty badass.
Yeah, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When you're talking about James Bond, this motherfucker can ski. He can fucking ski.
And at the end of this incredible ski run, he reaches the point where there's nowhere to go. These Russian guys are in hot pursuit, and he skis off a
Off the cliff.
goddamn cliff into just thin air. Thousands of feet dropping. What's going to happen? His skis fall off. You're like, oh my God, James Bond is screwed. And then suddenly, that giant backpack opens up. A
it's a
parachute
parachute.
deploys, and not just any parachute. It's got the Union Jack on it. And there's a little bit of a music cue.
Did you? One of the trivia things was when they screened it. I think for the royal family or whatever, the prince like stood up when the
Oh yeah,
when the
got to
Union Jack
stand up
was
to
on.
salute the Union Jack. They were saying there was like tears in people's eyes when they saw that.
Yeah.
It was like the best stunt when they came up with that idea. They were
They
like,
paid
oh my
that guy
God.
$30,000 just to do that.
Which in
Just to
today's money is
basically-
like $1 billion.
it's
but he's free falling. He's
Matt is our
free-falling.
official.
saying
Matt
that.
is our official money currency translator.
Guys, I'm no mathematician, but pretty sure I got
yeah, but it's
currency.
He's free falling for like 10 seconds.
oh, it's a long and
The
it's
skis are flying
basically-
everywhere. The ski could have punctured the thing.
I think I can't remember. I think they said that he skied off a cliff in is it somewhere in Vancouver?
Yeah, it's in Canada.
But it's but it's basically a base jump ski off the edge of a cliff, and then into
And,
this parachute thing.
It was
is
so hard
nuts.
to get it. Like they had like 4 or 5 cameras, only one camera. Like even,
Oh, I think yeah, I heard they had even more than 4, but only one of them actually ended up catching it, and luckily it was a great view of it. So yeah, really one of the best cold opens, pretty badass. And it was when I saw that parachute open, I realized this is probably the James Bond movie I watched the most as a kid. Like just on television, I was like, everything about it was so familiar, and I was like, this is the one of the old Bonds that I remember the most from watching on TV as a kid. And it just kept on happening throughout this movie. I kept being like,
it's all signature Bond stuff.
Yeah.
The only I only wish it was like the parachute backpack wasn't so big because it's like when he first skis out of the door, I'm like, what is in his backpack?
I just assumed
Is
it was
it?
survival gear.
We're
like,
trying to find
of
that
course,
70s
picnic
music,
table.
the 70s Bond theme. Oh yeah, this is it.
Oh yeah,
The
you can hear
cowbell.
it. The little wah 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 wah.
Oh yeah.
That's the stuff.
Now
Now picture some hot skiing action, some bullets that explode into flames, weird whooshing sound
Oh,
effects
that
when
funky
people
bass.
jump.
Hear
Ski
that?
jumping.
Yep.
He's skiing forward. He turns around. He's skiing backwards.
backwards.
He looks at the ski pole. There's a little trigger on it. Oh, he points it at a guy. He shoots him. It's a gun ski pole.
I like this. Let's
British government paid for
reenact it
that?
over with words over the music.
It's pretty great. I'm sure everyone out there is getting the feeling of it. Right. And that whole thing leads up into our main titles and theme song.
This is the part. Okay, the rest is all pretty much the same.
All right. We gotta move on.
I mean, can we
you
just
could
leave
listen to
this?
this.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
A better podcast is just listening to this music for. Just kidding. No, listen to us.
So, anyways, we get the title sequence.
Yeah.
What did we think about this one?
It's Mo Binder again. It's naked women, silhouettes, some suggestion of underwater stuff. I thought there was really some cool. It's pretty much standard James Bond theme. It's Maurice Binder's been doing these for a long time, and it's nothing revolutionary, and yet the execution I thought was really great here. And I love the you have male and female secret agents running around, and they do some interesting things with like.
There's one part in particular I like where he's they're holding hands. They're like running away and holding
And he
hands.
turns.
And he turns to shoot. But like you don't just see that. You see it 3 times because they like stop and start it like with a
And there's like
a time lapse.
3
effect.
different versions of them.
and it's like, but they're all like running and holding hands together.
and it's all like subtly different. And then there's another great one where there's 3 of the female spies like sort of march out to him, and he shoots them with a gun, and they all fall over. It's like they do a nice job of being creative with the old gag.
Yeah.
And you have like a great song going along with it.
You
as well.
also see a lot of nip in this movie.
yes.
During that part, you see quite a bit. I forgot to mention in the very beginning of the movie, during the submarine part, a guy's like walking down a hallway, and as the camera backs up, it reveals like posters hanging on the wall. You see boobs. This is a PG movie. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it is PG.
Matt has a great eye for this kind of stuff, and it's
These
not
are-
just
I
because
like-
he watches it in freeze frame and frame by frames the entire thing.
I like doing these segments. This is my segment, the nip show. Like how much nip is in the Bond movie?
Welcome to the Nip Show.
Oh, do we have Carly Simon playing right now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so
Yep.
what was I gonna say?
Continue.
Yeah, right.
I'll interject anytime boobs are in the movie.
Please.
Speaking of, well, I just want to go right in. This is the best wardrobe or costumes I think in a lot of. It's top. It's in the top
For
5.
who? For everyone?
Everyone across the board. Stromberg's got the same bullshit they always put the villain in.
So nobody does
obviously.
it better?
Nehru
But-
jackets. Yeah,
But
nobody
every
does it
single
better than
suit
this.
Bond has, at least every single tie is great. Almost all the suits are really good.
The girls' outfits are really good too.
Though especially them being in the tuxedo and she's in the evening gown with the little like diamond thing, and they're in that for like 3 different scenes because like they
have a
are doing spy
survivalist
stuff,
type,
right?
yeah.
And those outfits are so good.
Stromberg puts her in a nice dress too.
My favorite is the hotel receptionist, who has some kind of like frills or furls. I don't. What's the distinction between a frill and a furl?
I don't know.
Frill
I don't
is
know
like
what a furl is.
a frill.
A frill,
Well, a
frilly.
frill frills and a furl unfurls.
But like she's just got this like shit all over her chest.
Boobs.
Boobs. She's got some big old
We're
boobs.
gonna leave the shit
But
all
it's
over
like
the chest.
no. I mean, I don't know how to say
All right,
it.
so what happens next, guys?
It's just a really great.
Well, what happens next is we listen to this great Carly Simon
should we
song.
do the?
We're still
should we
listening
do
to the
this-
song.
should we
We're
Listen
supposed
to
to
the
be
song. We
talking
haven't even
about
talked
it.
about the song.
Okay.
It's one of the great. It's one of the.
It was nominated for an Oscar for
Yeah.
Best Song.
This movie was the most Oscar-nominated Bond film
Until Skyfall.
Until Skyfall.
It was
mostly
nominated for
based
3
on,
things.
Yeah, it was the production design, the soundtrack, and not the soundtrack, the score and the song. But this is one of the greats. It's Marvin Hamlish wrote it. Carly Simon sings it. She's got a great voice. It's a catchy tune. It's got that, but it's like it's got sneaky hooks too, because there's a lot of them like Live and Let Die and You Only Live Twice that have like a great noticeable hook. But this one's got a nice that little piano intro and outro that they do. Then it's got the drum beat comes in really hard after the first verse, and it's like cool there. And then there's even like a change up at the end when like the outro music sort of changes into this like more intense up tempo stuff. It's just a really great catchy song.
Yeah, it's excellent.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's like top 3 I think for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
What,
it's up
didn't
there.
they use this song for other companies use this? Like I feel like I heard this growing up for like on a Safeway commercial or something like that.
Oh, maybe.
Well, and it definitely was one of Carly Simon's biggest hits.
Just-
So she
I
and
feel
she's
like I've heard other companies use
This
it
is
for
a
some
song
reason.
I
Yeah.
would say like one of the few Bond songs that transcends its Bondness.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it
Like
was
Live and
a
Let Die,
popular
for sure.
song. Yeah,
Yeah.
Live and Let Die too. I would say Skyfall maybe also. That was pretty popular on the radio.
Mhm.
Which song is that?
Skyfall.
Wait, no, what's the artist?
Adele.
Oh,
Skyfall.
Adele. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Skyfall by Skyfall.
Boobs.
yeah. Boobs.
Yeah,
$1
Adele.
billion.
She's known for singing well, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
She's all right.
So Matt, you were talking a little bit about this being peak Connery. I still don't think
Moore.
he's, or peak Moore. Sorry, I still don't think he's like not totally convincing as a tough guy. But what I do think they figured out was that his strength was a little different, and they
Yeah.
wrote the character to be more quippy, way more suave. And they also dropped. I feel like at the beginning they were doing that bourbon and cigars thing to try to differentiate him.
yeah.
And finally they were just like, you know what? Everyone knows that he's different. He can just be himself and just sort of do his own
Well,
thing.
in
And
this
I
one,
felt
they
like,
acknowledge all the old movies now. They went back when she knows, when the enemy spy, Triple X, she knows his backstory. She includes the fact that he has sex with a lot of women, but she also includes the fact that she knows he was married once, which they didn't acknowledge with Roger Moore until now.
Right.
right.
Remember when we talked about
And
Diamonds
you
Are
thought that
Forever?
it was more ambiguous than we
yeah,
did,
they just
but-
left it like
Ambiguous.
maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen, right?
Right.
But now they're like, okay, well, yeah, we made that movie, we did it.
Right. So up to this point in the canon, they are now acknowledging that all the Sean Connery movies that happened before this, like it all happened in a row. Like
Right.
up to and this is the same guy, even though
Yeah.
he's played by a different actor. It's the same character.
Right.
That this gets a little vague down the road. We'll get there when they start changing things up and when enough time passes that it couldn't logically be the same.
I mean, technically, enough time has passed already, as we talked about when we talked about Coral.
Yeah,
and,
what
and
was the
Coral
first
Jr.
one? Like 55,
62.
62?
So let's say if he was 30 years old in 1962, what year is it now?
77.
Come on, Matt.
8
Light
plus
math,
7
come
plus
on.
30 is
30 plus 17,
45.
so he's 47. No, I'm sorry, 62, not 60.
What?
So 45. Yeah, you're right. yeah.
Is that still
The
45?
important thing is,
So it could be
that-
done. He could be a 45-year-old spy.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but-
Quarrel's son wouldn't be older than Quarrel would be.
We
And
know about-
We've
we
already
know
covered
about
that.
that.
Meanwhile,
But by the time we get to the 80s, he's like, a mid-50s guy, still out there running and gunning. I don't know about that,
Yeah.
And by the
Although-
time we get to the 90s, he's
although
in
Moore,
his 60s.
Moore was already
They
fairly
should have
old
given
for a
him
Bond,
like
so.
crutches or like a wheelchair that had gadgets and stuff. Just
I want
keep it going.
to someday. I think we should make the old Bond movie where it's like
I'm
a
back,
geriatric Bond
Yeah,
comes out of retirement. The Bond retirement home version. What do we think of the? So you mentioned the hotel receptionist. We have some great Bond girls. Barbara Bach is totally hot and a badass, and really didn't have any career outside of this. I think her most notable other thing was that she
Ringo
married
Starr.
Mr. Sir Richard Starkey. a.k.a. Ringo Starr, a.k.a. the other Beatle.
Yep.
But she was. I thought she was great. I couldn't believe she didn't.
Did they stay married? Do we know that?
For how long? I mean,
That's what I'm asking.
I don't.
Are they still married to this day?
Yeah, that's what I want.
I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Okay.
Even
Nobody
they aren't.
But she's
really
really.
clear on it.
Provocative.
I don't know that she's a really great actress, but she's really good for this part.
She did the part
she
well.
nails the part, and she has like a charm that's indescribable, I'd say.
She doesn't have a Russian accent until I think there was like one scene where she has a Russian accent. She pulls it out.
Her accent is
kinda-
just like a weird
she
accent.
kinda
you know
has
what I
a
mean? Like,
Russian
oh, you
accent.
just sound vaguely foreign.
What's interesting was when she was trying to get into acting, she got cast in a lot of like Italian movies and stuff like that because she was obviously beautiful. But when she tried out for American parts, apparently she lost some parts because they were like, but can you do an American accent? She's from New York. She's a born and raised American, but there's something about her that made people think that she was foreign. So finally, she went overseas and acted in Italian movies, and then in this, she sort of embraced it. So she didn't have to like actually have a convincing American accent.
Yeah, but I think they wanted. I think, you know, whatever it is to actually be like Russian in the 70s or whatever. I think what they wanted was a certain like, you know, coldness and like a certain like kind of. Like an emotional veil. Like you can't always see exactly what she's thinking or feeling, which really comes in handy when it's like, oh, like does she hate Bond? Does she love Bond or whatever?
I think she is still with Ringo Starr. We just looked it up. It says like his first wife was from this date to that, and then it just says her 1981.
Does it have the hyphen that without anything on the other side of it?
It just says
That
1981.
means they're still doing
They're
it.
happily married.
Still
They actually
rocking it.
Congratulations.
I guess nobody does it better.
Nobody does better. Yeah, they actually, you know what it was? They were co-stars in a movie called Caveman, which was a terrible movie.
Man,
And
I saw that.
This doesn't sound real to me.
Oh my God, it is a comedy that's basically like about cavemen.
It's Ringo
similar
Starr.
to
and
Encino Man with
Ringo
Brendan
Starr
Fraser?
stars in it. I would say it's probably better than Encino Man slightly.
You've never seen it? I remember seeing it
never
as a
seen it.
kid. I think there's a part where there's a pterodactyl egg and they crack it open and they cook it.
I believe there
and
is.
like,
Yes,
like
a
an
giant
egg, but it's a
egg.
giant
Yeah.
egg. Yeah.
Yes,
That sounds
it's not a
funny.
it's not a great movie, but it has its moments, and it led to a very long-lasting relationship.
So what other girls are in this movie?
What about the one who flies the helicopter?
The
She's the
henchman?
only
Naomi.
One, yeah, Naomi. Yes, and gets blown up.
that's another costume.
First woman that Bond kills in a movie.
That's another
First.
costume that they really nailed it. When she hops off that boat and she's wearing the bikini with that like thing over it,
and
like
she got real attitude. Yeah,
Yeah, like the thing, the jacket thing, the thing you wear over a swimsuit or whatever.
Right.
It like matches the swimsuit perfectly, and
Did
it has
you-
all these little danglies of like the colors that color code it to the.
It's really
we're gonna have to have Colin just do a blog on costumes
clothing,
and
yeah.
give him an erection.
Did you read? You said that she had an attitude.
Yeah.
Did you read why she had an attitude?
No, I didn't. Matt, tell me.
Apparently, she got stung by a bee in the butt, like right before they shot this, and they said just use it. And so she was like upset that a bee bit her bottom, and now her
they were
bottom's big.
making
I would
They're
love to
making
see
your
that
shit
conversation.
anyways.
I can't
Funny,
go
Penny.
on. I was
Where's
stung by a
Stefano,
bee
He's
in the
on a mission,
butt.
sir, in Austria.
Well, tell him to pull out. Immediately.
Guys, I'm finding soundboards live.
This is what the podcast has been missing.
Right. But now we've broken down. We didn't do the 2-minute plot summary thing.
Oh yeah, do
Oh.
you want to try that?
Get on it.
I'm gonna go for it.
I
okay?
feel like we need a theme song for this next time.
Okay, yeah,
like a
all
little
right.
like. Da-da-da-da.
Here we go.
It should be the exciting James Bond action.
Dun, 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 dun,
I
dun,
have
dun.
I can
All right,
pull
okay.
it up right now.
Hold on,
Right.
let him pull it up.
Okay.
Let's talk about bullshit
him-
until then.
let him-
Oh, you got it?
Go.
All right, so here goes. We start out James Bond. He's in Austria, and they're chasing him. He kills some people. He gets away. He's got to go find these submarines because the submarines are missing. M tells him you got to find the submarines. We also know that there's a Russian woman she's looking for, a Russian submarine too. He knows that the plans for a device that could locate the submarines are in Egypt somewhere, so he goes to Egypt. Then he avoids getting killed by a guy, and then he tries to find another guy, and that guy gets killed by Jaws, who's this 7-foot man with iron teeth. He meets the Russian agent, and they hit it off a little bit. They don't full on fall in love yet, but they're like having a banter. They keep chasing after this microfilm. They find the microfilm. Jaws tries to take it. They take it back from Jaws. Jaws try to kill them. Then they discover that in the microfilm, there's evidence that links it to Karl Stromberg. And so they go to Sardinia. They get chased and Stromberg's people try to kill them. Then they go check out Stromberg's place. Oh no, sorry. They check out Stromberg's place. Then they try to kill them. Then they decide to go on a submarine with Americans. Then that American submarine gets eaten by Stromberg's big boat that eats submarines, where his lair is, and he also has a lair that's Atlantis. It's an underwater city. And then they have a big showdown in the boat, and then he has to chase him back to the underwater city, and they show down, and then he saves the girl, and then they do it.
Boom.
Wow.
Oh, I missed the whole subplot about Bond has killed her lover. So there's a little subplot there where it's like, oh,
On
I've
a ski
fallen in
vacation.
love with you because like we enjoy having sex with each other. Oh wait, you killed my ex-boyfriend because he's my ex-boyfriend because he's dead. Oh, that makes me mad. I'm gonna kill you after this. And then he's like, oh, I don't think you should, but whatever. Let's just do it. And then, and then in the end, she's like, I still think I should kill you. And he's like, come on, you're not going to do that. And then she's like, no, I'm not going to.
She literally goes from squeezing the trigger with a gun that's pointed right at his face, and he's like, well, come on.
Yeah, he's
and then
like, come on. You're
then
not
he
gonna
pops a
do it.
champagne cork.
Yeah.
And it's like an awkward moment because there's champagne spilling everywhere, and he just sort of gives her a smile and a shrug, and
Yeah.
she's like, I was going to shoot you in the face, but now I think I'll bone you.
You know, I mean,
She's
it's
Mercurial.
simple logic, okay? Like, people live and they die, and in between that, they have sex. You can't have sex with dead people unless you're fucking weird. And so, at some point, if someone is dead, you can't have sex with them anymore, and there is a possibility that you will have sex with someone else if you are still alive. Simple logic.
I'm just going to take your word for it, Colin. That was the summary was great.
Yeah, great job.
Yeah, you did. You had like 15 seconds left, and you snuck in a subplot.
Let's get back to the villains. We kind of mentioned Jaws and Stromberg. Did you guys notice anything physically strange with Stromberg? I feel like there's a subtle thing here that a lot of people don't
he has webbed
notice.
hands, but I'd never noticed it until I read that.
Yeah, he has webbed
I had to go back and look at it when I read
There's
that.
one shot where he is looking at Bond, like Bond is arriving in Atlantis, and he looks at him through a monitor, and his hand reaches over to like push a button, and you're not really looking at his hand because you're looking at the monitor to see what Bond is doing. But if you look at his hand, you can see he has webbed hands.
Which
But
is kind of
when I didn't notice it, when I thought you should have noticed it, was she's like, oh, by the way, Stromberg doesn't shake hands.
It's right after that,
And then when
yeah.
Bond goes in there, he tries to shake hands with him, and
he
Stromberg puts his fingertips together like Mr. Burns style in front of his chest, and I couldn't see it then.
Well, because
I
the
feel like
camera
you
angle
just-
is poor, like it's like dead on, so
Yeah.
you can't see him. It should have been like from this
And
angle.
it would have been an
Yeah.
interesting point to kind of make a little more clearly, because his whole plan, and we didn't really
Okay,
get
yeah.
into this in the plot summary,
is what
but
we-
his whole brilliant plan is that he is going to steal these nuclear subs, use them to provoke a war between the superpowers, Russia and the United States, and then destroy the entire world above water in this horrible nuclear apocalypse where the entire world is gone and uninhabitable, and the only place to live will be on his undersea base, Atlantis, because he feels more comfortable being surrounded by fish and guys in red jumpsuits.
Yes. See, that's the thing here. So if you work for Karl Stromberg, you know his plan is to kill everyone in the world except like a bunch of guys on a tanker in red jumpsuits and basically no one else.
All
And no
guys.
Yeah, all
guys.
guys.
It's a real-
he
it's
did
a
have
real
one
sausage
woman
fest.
henchman who he sends on a helicopter to kill Bond.
And she
Bond
gets blown
kills
up.
her.
Yeah.
But we never see them interact, okay?
And there's no henchman wives quarters there.
Right.
It's-
And
he
when-
did
and-
have another female, like a secretary, in the very first scene,
And
where
he
she-
kills her
kills
himself.
too.
Yes, he kills her. Well, that wasn't her that wasn't his secretary. They make it a point that she was the one who betrayed him.
Right.
And that's why he has to kill her in front of some other guys.
But
who
clearly,
he then immediately
Who
kills.
he
right
kills
after.
them also.
But he clearly only had a couple of female employees. They did not survive to this new world.
he doesn't even have that many employees
Right.
if you think about wiping out the Earth's population. And
He's-
like we don't see the rest of the underwater city. We only see like his mansion part of Atlantis. So he kind of just wants to live alone with fish underwater while everyone is dead.
Yep.
Who signs up for that? And like
How much would you have to be paid to agree to do that?
And honestly, I think this makes this villain like not as good because like either you think about what he really is doing and you realize this guy's fucking weird, or you just take him as like a normal Bond villain, and then you're not thinking about what's happening in the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like he didn't think his plan through all the way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of...
Or he did, and he's like...
And this is what he wants.
up.
It's just like, I just want a bunch of dudes on an underwater base with a bunch of fish. Is that weird?
I also enjoy the music of the village people.
Harris and I were theorizing about this, what his prior sexual experiences could have been with women, what they could have been with fish, how fish came into it. And we determined that probably his ultimate sexual desire is like a mermaid, but like both bottom halves.
Fish on both ends. It's just,
So a fish.
Yeah, just a woman like a mermaid, but a fish with a fish head and a fish tail.
A human
vagina
woman
for
with
sure.
the bottom of a fish and also the top of a fish.
Have you ever seen anything so magnificent, Mr. Bond?
What about this species here, Mr. Bond?
That part gets me too. So Bond goes to Atlantis to meet Stromberg and like get a feel for this guy, and he's posing as a marine biologist. So he's had no time to plan. He just kind of is like, yeah, I'm a marine biologist. My name's Sterling, right? So he goes in there, and Stromberg has this massive like aquarium all around, and there's lots of tropical fish, and he's like, oh, marine biologist, you're a man much like myself. You must, appreciate all these fish, like this species here. And he points to like some random fish, and he like kind of goes like this, like, well, Mr. Bond, what is it? And Bond looks nervous for a second, but then he pulls it out and he says like the Latin name of the fish. How does he know?
He knows.
He knows everything.
He knows everything.
That was in his training. In the Navy, in the British Navy, you have to know all the kinds of fish in case you fall off the boat.
You have to know which ones you can ride to safety. You have to know which ones you can marry
Which
if
ones
it comes to that.
Which ones you could befriend.
Exactly. It's basic British naval.
No, you're wrong, Mr. Bond.
Naval
This is
training.
a fish I've crossbred with a human. This is my
also,
wife.
Also, that whole scene, think about it, right? They're looking for nuclear submarines full of enough nukes to nuke like 20 cities or something like that. And they're like, our best lead is to go like look at this guy's place. They roll up to this fucking mansion of like weird aquatic stuff, and he talks to the guy for 5 minutes. And he's like, I'm a marine biologist. And he's like, oh, I want to build this underwater city. And then Bond is like, oh, well, good luck. And then they leaves. He leaves.
He's also got like he gets in this. So this is Stromberg's evil base,
Right.
which looks like an evil base because it's sort of like it looks almost like
It's almost like he's a Bond
a
villain.
future. Yeah, it almost looks like
snap.
a futuristic oil rig where it's like on stilts in the ocean, but the stilts make it look like a giant spider with a face. It's like 80 feet tall.
Doesn't it kind of look like Sea Lab from the cartoon?
It does kind of look like Sea Lab
does.
from the cartoon,
I
and
don't
it
know.
submerges and it emerges from the water, and he basically somehow by posing as a scientist, he's like, hey, I'd like to tour your evil base, evil shipping genius, and the guy's like, yeah, come on in for 5 minutes and then leave.
I read that when they were like scouting locations for this movie, there's actually something like this in Japan that they were building. They were, or it was like almost complete or almost operational, but it was like this massive sea base kind of like ridiculous $1 billion operation thing. And when they brought Ken Adam there, they were basically like, please shoot here, we need money. And he was like, nah, this isn't gonna like.
Didn't it
'Cause
look
it
more
looked-
like an
it
oil
looked-
rig
it
and
looked
like
too
less
much
like
like an oil rig.
futuristic?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to get the shots that we need. And then like that company ended up
And then
going
if they'd
bankrupt.
already done an oil rig
It
scene
tanks.
before,
Good
so yeah.
use of words.
I
And
found a live clip of James Bond naming the fish. Just gonna play it for you guys real quick.
South Central, and I hated it. So I moved to Oahu. Now I can name you over 200 different kinds of fish.
No, you can't.
Oh, yes, I can.
Do it. Yeah, you cannot.
G, ghost piper fish, grill fish, goler fish, grouper fish, greenback.
What's the state fish of Hawaii?
Huma huma nuka nuka apua ah. Yeah, bitch.
That's from one of the later movies, I think.
I looked up the Sea Lab concept art of the actual like labs, and it looks like a lot like it.
Yeah, I think they stole this from Sea Lab. Actually,
It's like a very orb based design. There's lots of
Boobs.
Boobs.
Yes.
This movie like really started the cartoonish, like elements.
Right.
Or I wouldn't say
There
started.
were-
They were
there were
before.
quite a bit of cartoonish
But
elements.
this Stromberg guy,
But
like he's
this one,
so-
like think about Jaws and think
Yeah.
about
Oh.
the bass.
Can
and
we talk about Jaws for a second?
Let's talk
We
about
got-
Jaws.
Let's talk about Jaws. Jaws is introduced with this. There's two main henchmen in this. One is Jaws and one is Sandor. Let's get Sandor out of the way because that's going to be quick.
Yeah.
Sandor is short and bald and very thick, and Jaws is a giant, like Colin said. No, yeah, he looks like a kind of a little penis.
Yeah.
but thick,
a chode.
like girthy. Yeah, he's chode-esque.
He's a human chode.
Marry
and-
him with the fish.
and Jaws is giant with metal teeth.
What type of fish is that, Mr. Bond? I believe it's a chode fish.
You can tell by the smell.
He's smelling underwater.
You have a keen scent of smell, Mr. Bond.
But so Sandor was played by a former wrestler who's got, honestly, his life story is more interesting than his character story, but we're not going to get into that too much since he really is only on screen for a couple of minutes before Bond kills him very easily, like outfights this enormous, thick wrestler and then drops him off a roof. And his last act before getting killed is to rat out his boss.
Yeah.
So he's like a squealer. He's like the worst henchman in every single way.
But it's cool. They have this fight on the rooftop, and he kind of pushes him off the building. But before he can fall, he grabs Bond's tie. and
Another
he's-
great tie.
Yeah, and he's holding. That's a strong tie. He's holding it, and he's like dangling off the building. And Bond is like, "Where's who's he looking for at that point? Not Stromberg. He's looking for the next guy.
Feckish or
Oh,
something?
Yeah,
Feckish,
Feckish, yeah.
And he's like, "Where's Feckish? Where's Feckish?" And then he
at
goes,
the pyramids.
"Pyramids." And then Bond just goes whoosh, and hits his tie, and it like slips out of the guy's hand.
Judo chops it.
Yeah, he judo chops it.
I mean, he does a joke then too, but it's not that great a
Yeah,
joke.
it's
what
like,
does he say?
oh, he was an accommodating fellow or something like that.
Yeah,
it's something
it's
about
like,
how he ratted everyone out. But then the other part of this tandem of henchmen is Jaws, and Jaws is introduced very briefly in Stromberg's lair. The next time we see him is at the pyramids where they're doing some kind of crazy light show, and Bond is looking for this guy Feckish, and Triple X and Jaws are also both looking for this guy separately. And we see these like this crazy synth music cue, and these lights come up in the pyramid, and that's the first time we see Jaws like shot from the bottom, all shadowy.
Yeah,
It's
that
like
was cool. That's
wong.
It's a real show.
It's really a badass way to introduce
Yeah.
the character too, because he looks totally dope, and then he chases Feckish in, and Feckish tries to get away and locks himself in this cage with a lock. With a chain that Jaws bites the chain open. Then he goes and he eats Feckish's neck, which is a little weird and vampire-y.
Yeah.
But he bites his neck open with his giant teeth.
No blood.
No blood.
You don't see it.
And then Jaws, James Bond is following Feckish, so he ends up seeing Jaws and cornering him, and he's got him at gunpoint, and Jaws has nowhere to run, and then the lights for the show go down for like a half a second, and when they come back up again, he's gone.
Right. This is great. The cinematography and all the Egypt stuff is all really good. Even that little fight scene with the bald guy, like it has cool like angles and like great location.
Yep. And Claude
And,
Renoir was actually losing his vision at this point, which was he was the guy who
Yes.
shot this thing.
Oh.
But as usual, like great cinematography and amazing. A lot of the Egypt stuff had a lot of location shooting at freaking unreal, great looking like temples that were just so massive and spectacular. But it also always just even like the tent set in Egypt when they go into the tent is totally cool. Has great depth of field. Ken Adams knocking it out of the park as usual on this.
Well,
Some of the best sets in the whole franchise.
The sets at the end with the base, the submarine stuff is
Yeah.
like they're incredible.
Oh, the
I
tanker,
forgot how
yeah.
many gallons of water that thing held, but it was.
and I started thinking like, how much did this stuff cost, or like, how did they have enough money for the budget? And I realized like the whole entire first half of this movie in Egypt is all like actual locations.
location stuff.
Right,
They
yeah.
make such great use of them.
But they built the inside of the tanker boat on the inside of a studio, and
Soundstage,
all
yeah.
that water is in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that
like
was
just that cost like $1 million or something
Yep.
like that.
That was at Pinewood,
Which of course,
Which was this is the first time they used
in
it. right?
today's money would be.
$1 billion.
Boom.
But anyways, that's just Jaws' introduction. He has so many, like, it's hard to remember any henchman in any movie ever in any franchise having as many great, awesome, like ridiculous moments and scenes. They chase him around a pyramid where Triple X and Bond are chasing him, and then he ends up getting the drop on them and almost kills him there before Bond brings the whole pyramid down on him. They have another fight in a train, which we saw on From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
I think this is our third great train fight here.
I was gonna
because we had
say
another one
Live
in
and Let Die.
Live and Let Die, but this was a great one again.
I was gonna say that I feel like Roger Moore was doing more with his like fight scene choreography.
Oh, yeah.
Than he was last movie, even though they did like an Enter the Dragon thing with the last movie.
Mm-hmm. And Jaws was such an impressive guy to fight, but it was like they made it look like Bond could hold his own, even though his main move is just
I
like
still
freaking
do
mule
think
kick,
Roger Moore
kicking
looks a
guys in
little
the gut.
awkward. Like
Yeah,
several
it's
times.
just a flying gut kick is his patented move. But
yeah, I mean, if you strike with the shin to the middle abdomen in the correct way, I think it is a very violent strike.
Like
It will at least
kickboxing or something?
it will at least make you like be hunched over for like 10 seconds so that the next move can happen.
this doesn't look so much like a kickboxing strike as like a guy who really
it's like his legs out like this.
It's like kind of a flying jump, and then somebody wraps their stomach around his leg. But the coolest thing about Jaws, he doesn't talk at all, but he's basically indestructible. They throw him out of a train. They drop an ancient temple on his head.
He falls in a car full of 3 other people onto a house. They all die. He lives.
He walks
Right.
out of the house like
Unscathed.
dusting himself.
He's always
off.
dusting himself off.
Yeah.
And at the
every
end,
scene with him in it, the end is him dusting himself off
because somebody
he
like
should
dropped
have
a
been
building
dead.
on him, and all he's got is like dust on him.
Yeah.
In the end, Bond actually uses his teeth against him to use a high-powered magnet to attract his teeth, lowers him over a shark tank, and drops him into the hungry shark there.
That's how he wins
And-
the train fight too. He electrocutes him.
Yeah,
to
he
the teeth.
electrocutes him. And so he's using his greatest advantage against him. Of course, when he drops him into the shark tank, Jaws immediately grabs the shark
And bites
and eats the shark.
And this is right after Jaws the movie
Yeah.
had
Right.
come out, like a year or 2 years before.
And it's a good-looking underwater shark fight. I don't really know how they did it, but they made it look pretty convincing. It looks like a giant dude fighting a big
I
shark.
didn't think about that. I just assumed they really like
Just
threw
drop
him in with
Richard
the
Keel
shark.
in with a
There you
shark.
go.
It was just like,
the
eat this
effects
shark.
in this movie are great. Even like the
Very little cheesiness.
the
in
in-camera
effects.
shots of like the Atlantis and like them approaching it on the boat and like how it goes
Right.
into it, like all that stuff looks really good. I mean, now we can we have the eye to see like how
Yeah.
they did it, but it doesn't look cheesy or anything.
Yeah, it's a model.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Oh,
Colin.
thank you. Didn't know.
But so like it's like a smaller thing of the
Like,
thing
I don't know
that
if you guys
think
know
it
how
is.
models work.
Is that like an early form of CGI?
Yes.
But yeah, the early form of CGI in this movie was very good. it was so much so that you like when you noticed, like you were saying before, with the skiing close-ups, you noticed it when it was bad because you were like, we've had some hilariously bad special effects in this series, and this one they did a lot of it practically, and the stuff they blended in. With that was really well done, and just the scope of everything was huge. The base, that model base they had, looked huge, and you see cut to Roger Moore looking up at it, and you're like, Jesus, that thing's big.
So let me ask you this. So far, we're saying the song was great, the opening titles are great, the cold open was great, the costumes are great, the actors are great, the casting is great, the villains are great,
Stromberg's too
Boobs
weird.
are great.
the boobs are great, the effects are great. What didn't we like about this movie? What doesn't work? What is going against it?
I've got a few.
Stromberg and the whole like fish fetish thing. They should have either like put it like out there, or they should have like given him a backstory or something.
Stromberg in general is just another Bond villain with yet another really dumb, lame plan.
But I think the actor who played him did a really good job.
Oh yeah, I think I'd put him somewhere between Telly Savalas on the low end and Donald Pleasance on the high end of my Blofeld ranking, because basically he's just a knockoff Blofeld. So he's somewhere in the middle of my Blofeld.
This is kind of my beef with James Bond, though. Like, he has an eclectic, like, diverse selection of villains, but there's not really, like, even Blofeld. Like, Blofeld is maybe, like, the yin to his yang a little bit.
right.
But even he's not that great. And we don't have a full grasp of him because he was played by, like, 9 different actors. So there's not that, like...
Always doing some different
There's no,
thing.
like, Joker to the Batman. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Of course not.
Bond has all these villains, and they're all pretty, like, different but vanilla in their own
the
way.
best
you
you
know?
can hope for is a great henchman, because this is one where they sort of leaned into that a little bit, because
Yeah.
instead of having his final fight, they usually save the main villain for the end, and this one is he kills Stromberg guy pretty easily in yet another lame scene where you're like, Stromberg, what the hell are you thinking? Like, you know, you've got one shot with this spear gun thing under the table.
Why would you warn him?
Yeah, well, and then he warns him, and then basically he's got a gun under the table, and Bond easily avoids that gun and then shoots him the exact same way. I assume in the penis several times. It looks like, but they know that that's not their big payoff because they know that Stromberg is not the biggest threat to Bond. So then they put Bond in a much better battle with Jaws to end the movie, which makes a lot more sense. But this is the best thing. I mean, this is one of the best things about this movie is they knew that Jaws was a badass villain, and they were like, let's just make him the guy that Bond has to be.
Final fight.
Well, yeah, but that's what I think this movie lacks because, like, we look at when we all watch Goldfinger, what stood out for us that really like made the narrative and the pacing work was the Goldfinger character.
Yeah,
Stromberg doesn't give you that because it's like, what is going on with this dude? He is freaking weird, and they really gloss over that part. I honestly, if they had just made him like, they're like, oh yeah, it's Carl Stromberg. He's known for having sex with fish. Like if they'd have just gone and done it, it might have been better.
They could have done a scene where like they're like, Bond, have you heard of Stromberg? And he's like, you mean Carl Stromberg?
No, the
lover
first thing
of
he'd say is, no, not really. Oh wait, is he the
Yeah,
guy?
yeah.
And then
Oh,
give his
wait.
entire biography and he bones fish, I believe. He's partial to tuna.
Oh.
But yeah, but like the story is like, okay, you know, the good part of the story is Bond and the spy who loved him, right? The villain is like so secondary that if you start thinking about it, it doesn't make sense.
Right. No, definitely do not think about the plot in this.
And that's what everything else about this movie is so great. That's what takes away.
Let me
from
run
it,
down
to me.
a short list of the other weaknesses of this movie. It's got a bunch of, not a lot, but it's got a few like stupid cheesy sound effects that they throw in at weird places that I just noticed that were like weird sound effect cues that were kind of dumb.
Like what?
Well, the whooshing of the ski jump thing is the first thing I noticed, but I did notice a couple more. Just like, is there like I think there's like a bonk sound effect at one point where somebody gets hit and they do like a boing. They're leaning into some of the comedy a little hard that we're seeing I mean, we already talked about how there's a lot of lame jokes that don't really land in this movie.
This is also the first Bond movie to use music from other movies. Like they have a gag where they're in the desert and they play the Lawrence of Arabia theme.
Tune. And some of those music cues worked, but they did so many of them. They did like 5 like joke music cues, and only a couple of them
One
worked.
of them was like some Russian thing she had played a chime, and it was like the Dr. Zhivago theme.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of them worked. A lot of them didn't. I also thought the shots of the subs, like that, supposed to be this tense moment where there's these 2 subs that are going to blast each other with nukes, and it took forever. It started reminding me of like some of the other underwater scenes where I'm just like, oh, get it over with.
This also has the problem we've talked about before, where the ending is too long and there's too many endings.
Yeah.
Like basically like once the sub-eating boat eats them and they're all there together and they're having a showdown, basically, then that should be the ending. But Stromberg leaves with the girl and kidnaps her, which it kind of works, but like it really stretches out the back end of the movie.
You know, I'm gonna argue that in this case, I didn't mind it. That I've complained about that in the past.
Yeah.
They have a massive badass battle in that tanker, but at the same time, you knew Stromberg was gone, so you knew that wasn't the way the movie was going to end. You also knew that there were a lot of other things up in the air. I just wish when that battle ends, they have like a scene of them trying to thwart these nukes, which they could have, like, he had to steal the nuke to break into the control room.
That
That scene
much
just
stuff,
took
right?
too damn long.
Which
if they had cut
it
8
shows
minutes out
how
of that,
great a set that was,
right?
Because like, okay, so they're in the place and he frees all the seamen. He frees all the seamen from their prison, and they begin to take back over the ship from the red jumpsuits guy.
Should I take over for you?
I got it. And they do, except they can't take the control room because it has like a metal barrier wall. And so he has to go back in, dismantle one of the nukes, take the detonator out, make a new bomb the door, go in, then take it over, then get the submarines to nuke each other instead of New York and Moscow.
And if you, like me, were wishing that Colin could have gotten through that a little faster, you know how it feels to watch those scenes in the movie where they are almost as long as what he was just saying.
Right. And the other key thing to remember about that is that there is a lot of grenade throwing, and every single time, mostly, they try to throw Kareem sky hooks with the grenades. Did you notice that?
Yeah, that is how you throw a grenade. I mean, that's it's just that's how they're teaching them in the military. So that's probably
this
what
was
they
77, right? This was like the height of like Kareem was like just coming onto the scene, right?
Can I just briefly point out my favorite scene in that entire battle? Because they have this huge battle in this massive tanker set. It's the most badass set. There's like a million guys. There's a bunch of guys in red suits, and there's all these guys from the submarines that have been prisoners, the seamen, as Colin prefers
technical term.
Yeah, it is. And at one point, they're like, "We've got to penetrate this this base that's got this blast shield up
with the seamen."
With the seamen, and one of the
made it all over her chest.
It's all over my forearm. I'm back, bitch.
And one of the guys rushes up. One of these handsome young men, like probably a future James Bond. He rushes up. He's this British kid, and he's like, "Leave it to me, sir." And he grabs a couple of men, and he heads up this plank, and he immediately gets shot like roughly a billion times by every machine gun in the place. It's like his moment of heroism lasts, I think, under 18 seconds.
He calls him out by name instead of like you, come help me. He's like Lapkus, like Smith, Johnson.
He's like a great leader.
British ones.
He's like a great leader. He's brave. He's strong. He's handsome. He's ready to be recruited.
These guys are going to be important. We know their names. No, and they're dead in 5 seconds.
Oh yeah,
they die really fast.
Really fast. Just gets machine gunned all to hell.
Bond uses a machine gun. Is this the first time he ever like annihilates someone with a machine gun?
Oh yeah, he walks into a room and just like he's like, there's 18 guys in there. He's just like,
and like people just get like riddled with bullets.
Well, there's a lot of red jumpsuits guys. What was he gonna do? He can't karate chop them all.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, judo chop them all.
But those guys are pretty passionate about the future world of them living.
But why?
They're willing to die for that.
This is what I was gonna say. When they get to the final guy, the guy who's the boss of them, like the underboss who like Stromberg left the nuking to be done by, that guy's just like his whole look once they get in there, he's like, why was I even doing this? And then he dies, he
was like, I just realized
what does my life come to?
It's like Bond gets him, he's like, I just realized there weren't gonna be any boobs.
Boobs. Before we get to the very end,
I just want to say one more lame thing. Bond at one point rides on like baby's first jet ski.
Oh,
it's the dorkiest looking jet ski.
That is
Wet
the
Nelly?
dopest shit I've ever seen. I love that jet ski.
Do you remember Little Nelly? Was that the name of it? The helicopter in like the previous movie, they called it Little Nelly. This one they called Wet Nelly.
Oh yeah, no,
Wet Nelly. Yeah.
But this has my favorite Bond car.
Oh yeah, the Lotus.
Wait, that's what I was getting to. Yeah. So my favorite sequence in this whole movie is the car, obviously. But in getting to that, it's okay. So this is a stupid thing, classic like Bond villain thing. He has Bond. He knows who he is. He's right there in front of him. He knows he's lying to him about this marine biologist thing, but he lets him leave, and he then gets Jaws and says, when they get to the mainland, kill them. Why not just kill them right there? Just kill them. They're on your base.
Blow up the boat that you just sent them out in. Just put a bomb on your own
You sent two guys
boat.
out on a helicopter earlier in the movie and blew them up with the push of a button.
Oh, good point.
He doesn't want them killed in front of the fish. Yes. He doesn't want his fishies to see that.
Must not disturb their peaceful life.
by the death of these.
So they get to the mainland. Q gives Bond a car, a Lotus. It's like this white, futuristic-looking concept car kind of thing.
Do you want to talk about how they found this car and how they cast the car in the movie?
You could. Either of us could.
It's a good story, but let me just finish this sequence and then you can tell that. So he gets the car. We see Q like explain some things to him like from a distance. We don't hear what he says. They get in the car. They drive off. So the first thing that happens is a guy riding a motorcycle with a sidecar is chasing them down. And they both realize they're finishing each other's sentences. She's like, James, that motorcycle behind us is, and he's like, been following us for the last mile. Yes, I know. Like they're trying to show that like they're both they're equals. You know,
Right.
she's the James
the
Bond.
driving part was bad too.
Yeah.
When she can't drive and he's like being a total dick about
Oh
it.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the only time that they really sort of knocked her down a peg. I think they tried to let her go toe to toe with him for the
Yeah.
most part, but then they made fun of the fact that she couldn't drive,
Well,
which
apparently
was true.
they say that's true, that she didn't know how to drive stick, and all those comments were like he was just really making fun of her.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the sidecar guy pushes a button, and the sidecar is of course a missile. So
Awesome.
it like shoots forward. Bond goes around a truck. The truck gets hit and explodes. It's full of feathers. The motorcycle guy goes through it, and then like the feathers disorient him, and he flies off a cliff and
all
dies.
those feathers, and he still can't fly.
Yes, great
Yeah.
joke.
Which
Not
that
a
one's
great
not
joke.
even that funny.
No, it's not.
And also, he was like about 100 feet behind them, and I don't know how they saw the feathers or him dying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you think it's over. Oh, wow, we avoided that. Nope. Then a car comes out of nowhere. It's got Jaws and 3 other guys. They're all shooting out the windows. And I forget how they stop them.
That's the one that when the car lands inside the house.
Yeah, but how did they get them to fall off the cliff? Did he just
don't
shoot
they have
at
a?
them,
Don't
or-
they have?
Oh
have
no,
like
it's
a-
the cement windshield thing.
yeah.
The car sprays cement onto their windshield.
That's right. Yeah. And then they can't see. They fly off a cliff, and they go through the roof of like this little Italian like house, and
Yeah.
this
Which was
little-
also
like a
corny as
shack.
hell, and I think had a weird sound effect associated with it.
yeah,
too.
and the way it lands is like kind of
yeah,
corny.
Yeah,
like
like
directly.
Yeah.
Jaws is like
You said
Jaws is a cool
erectly, or
villain,
no?
but he is very
Directly.
cartoonish.
He is the introduction of the really cartoonish James Bond. Like
Yeah.
he's the segue into Moonraker.
Well, I don't have a great opinion of Jaws in general, and watching this movie, I was amazed at how badass and awesome and enjoyable he was. And I think my opinion is colored a lot by remembering Moonraker when I think they cheese him up quite a bit.
I
You only
just
saw
wish-
little bits of it here, and then they're like, oh yeah, now we're just going to.
I just wish they kept him menacing and less corny, and then like even give him the
Exactly.
final fight, but give him a cool death at the end. Like
Exactly.
instead of the magnet thing is brilliant, and instead of dropping him into a shark tank. Although I don't know, the Shark Tank works because his name is Jaws. It brings it full circle. Like that's a cool death. Using his teeth against him, and then he's eaten by a shark, which is his namesake.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
But I also like him eating the shark and then surviving, much like I like what's his name, the guy who escaped from on the train at the end of the Baron Samedi.
Oh, yeah.
I like the idea that,
Yeah,
that the
recurring.
villains don't necessarily all have to be killed. We've had him survive before.
Yeah.
The henchmen. I don't know that I need to ever see him again. I like the idea that he's like this invincible, unkillable monster. But then
he just like walks into the sunset. At
But
the
Right,
end.
yeah, but
But
we
the
don't
more
know
you-
his backstory.
the
like,
more you see
know,
him,
like
the less cool he is. You know, so
we don't know that he really loves killing that much. We know he loves.
There is a backstory. Did you read his backstory?
I did read
Maybe he
that, but
likes
that was
crochet.
written by wasn't
A
written by
novelist,
Fleming. It was written by the guy who wrote a novel of
novelization,
the
I
movie.
yeah.
believe it
Yeah.
was one of the screenwriters of the screenplay.
But anyway, so the car, they get
Wood.
dispatched, right? So then, oh wow, we're safe. All of a sudden, no, a helicopter comes out of nowhere. It's shooting at him, right? Who's driving the helicopter? Super hot Naomi, and she's in like a one of these.
Her helicopter negligee.
her helicopter negligee, exactly, right? She like smiles and she's winking at him and she's trying to kill
She
him.
pulls the helicopter up next to him at same speed as if they were two cars driving, but this is a helicopter in a car, and looks over at him, winks at him, and then he makes a face.
So Bond is doing all these tricks. He's spinning around 360, whatever. He's trying to avoid the helicopter. He can't do it, so he's forced to just drive across a dock into the water. And Triple X is freaking out. He's like, "I hope you can swim," or whatever.
That also doesn't make sense, but we
Yeah.
can cover that in a second.
What doesn't make sense?
That she's
freaking
scared.
out.
That's right, because she says something
Yeah.
later that doesn't make sense. So he pushes a button, and the car transforms into a submarine. It's the coolest thing.
It's awesome.
It's really like
very cool.
one of the better parts of this movie.
That's cool.
So, we're safe. We're underwater. Oh, first thing I got to do is push this button and shoot a
missile.
up to blow up the helicopter. He kills her. Now we're safe. Oh, that's it. So they get to his underwater base. All of a sudden, a bunch of guys in scuba gear come out.
And mini subs.
Mini
And
subs.
it's like a mini sub fight.
so
and at one point,
Yeah.
Triple X starts running the controls and using some of the gadgets in the
Oh,
thing.
she
And
pushes
he's like,
a button and a bomb falls.
yeah, he's like, what? How did you know that? And she's like, oh, I stole the blueprints for this
2
years ago. So why was she freaking out when they drove into the water?
yeah.
I don't think
still.
she really freaks out that much. Like I said, like the way she plays a lot of these scenes is like you don't quite
We've
see
seen
what
over the
she's-
top from
Yeah.
some like Bond girls in the
Oh,
past,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she
yeah.
doesn't do that.
Yeah, she's got a sort of veiled emotion thing going on.
So then to top it all off, Bond kills everyone with the submarine, and it kind of like runs out of power, and it kind of falls to
So
the
there
bottom.
are guys in scuba gear in that part, right?
Yeah.
So that's your favorite part.
What? Because I love scuba.
You do love scuba. You do.
I want to try to make that part of the podcast.
Colin loves semen. That's everyone's favorite part.
And Chris loves.
Boobs.
It's got it all.
It's got it all. So the sub turns back into a car and it rolls up onto a populated beach. Everybody's looking. They're like, "Oh my god, what is this car?" And the window rolls down and Bond drops a fish, which makes no sense. How
Well,
did
there
he
were
get that?
holes in the submarine and water was coming
Like
in.
bullet holes.
but
Yeah,
not
bullet holes.
Not fish-size holes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But that's a great scene because they
That
roll up
whole
onto a
sequence.
crowded beach with tourists everywhere.
Yeah, I just had for that. I just wrote down motorcycle dash sidecar dash land dash torpedo exclamation point exclamation point exclamation. That was my take on that.
I mean, it's a great sequence, but it's ultimately a pointless sequence because Stromberg could have just killed him.
Stromberg should have
He
killed him.
literally let them go just so they could have that chase sequence.
Also, that car is so
I mean,
cool.
The whole movie is kind of dumb if you think about it too much. So let's just get to the point where we talk. You know what else was great about this though? Another great Jaws moment when she opens the closet on the train. I legitimately was like, "Holy shit, that was scary."
That was scary. That was good.
I jumped.
Yeah.
All right, we got to get to the end. We're running out
Let's
of
do
time
it.
here.
I'm
So
ready.
the final bit, we actually kind of talked about it already. He kills Stromberg. This the stupid
Well,
thing.
he's got Agent Triple X tied up on a chair, and then he's sitting there like watching her tied up on a chair. But it doesn't look like he's like into it. though.
Stromberg was not sexually aroused in any way.
It's
He
almost
was-
like he desired
like,
something else.
if only she had the head of a fish and the tail of
The
a fish.
body of a
And
But-
the
and the
but he-
vagina of a fish.
But he does put her in like a sexy outfit, like a red.
Yeah.
like,
He was trying to work it up.
which
He
is
was
another
like,
great costume. Another
He's
great
like, no,
costume.
nothing. Still pushing rope.
They should have had him
Can
looking.
you make any fish noises?
No. Oh well. Time
should've-
for me to masturbate with my fish hands
Turn the lights out. Maybe.
once again.
They should have had him looking for the sexy outfit and like feeling the material and like none of them being scaly enough.
Just opening cans of tuna. And just putting them out.
So after he frees Triple X, kills Stromberg, he shoots him in the nuts, I assume.
Oh, with the jet ski though. The jet ski is awesome.
with the jet ski.
Why is that jet ski lame? That's the beginning of jet
'cause
skis.
it's-
No, because
the
it's
jet
like,
skis
you
became
receive
a
the
thing.
package from Q, and then they
Yeah.
bring in a thing like.
Yeah.
But also,
just
it's
knows what he
it's
needs
like
all the
it's
time.
like tiny, and it's got like little decals on the side that are like
It's awesome.
colorful, and it's like it doesn't look like a badass cool spy jet ski. It looks like a tiny mini like something that wouldn't go that fast and would be kind of lame.
I want one.
But he drops Jaws into the Jaws tank, and then the base they're on, his sub friends had orders to blow the thing up, so they blow the thing up. So as usual, it blows up. It floods, and he and Triple X have to escape, and they somehow manage to get into an escape pod. And then
Yeah,
they're
the escape pod. Why is the escape pod just a bed? Why is the
With champagne.
chilled
nice. Yeah. Well,
in
because
anticipation?
it was supposed to be full of fish, and that was going to be Stromberg's escape pod when he got out. It was just supposed to be fish and champagne.
Well, it does have those kind of windows. Like
Yes,
maybe he was
exactly.
just like, I'm going to escape and be
Hold
down
on.
here with the fish.
I found the note I was looking for. It says the film introduced to the world a spy sea scooter known as a wet bike, better known now as a jet ski, sparking a new water activity industry.
See, the jet skis are a thing because of it.
Yeah.
And
That's
they
how
all,
badass
and
it
every
was.
jet ski since then looks cooler than that one.
But yo, wet bike is a cool word. Like if I was like, yo, do you want to come to the beach? We're gonna ride wet bikes.
You want to come hop on my wet bike?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I would pass. I would pass absent more information just based on the name. I'd probably go ahead and.
But
let you.
amongst the crew, they didn't have a name for it at that point, so they just called it the motorbike that rides on water.
Which sounds like an Asian, like an American translation of like an Asian name for it. See,
Man who has sex with fish.
call it the something. It's motorbike that rides on water. So, anyways, they're Triple X is going to shoot him at the end for some reason, inexplicably. He gives her that look, and she decides not to. And then they get it on, and she's like, "What would our superiors say if they found out?" And he says, "They'll never know." And of course,
They immediately
get
picked
show
up on a big boat.
open it up, and the British M says 007, and the Russian guy says Triple X.
Yeah.
And he goes, "What are you doing?" And Bond says, Just keeping the British end up, sir.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Another innuendo.
Innuendo.
And that's the end of
To me, that one's funnier than the other ones.
The Spy Who Loved Me.
Keeping the British end up.
So are we at our...
It's British.
Yeah,
there.
well, with the last thing is it says Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only,
Oh
Which
wait,
he-
wait.
which he
which
did
is
not.
not true.
The Russian guy is a recurring character. He's going to come back. He's pretty good.
Go-
Triple X's boss.
Gogol.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
like
General
the Russian
Gogol.
M.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he comes back for
Oh,
like 5 movies. though.
Last thing, they say M's name in this one.
And Q's.
And Q.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
interesting.
It
Okay.
was.
Now back to the fact that they did the movies out of order.
Yeah, so they say the next Bond will be back in For Your Eyes Only, but then in the time that between when this movie came out and the next one, a little movie called Star Wars came out.
I've never heard of that. What's
yeah,
that
it
about?
apparently did really
Did that
well.
have some of those like pre-computer graphics?
Early
things we were
CGI.
talking
I
about?
have,
Early
a,
CGI?
I have
Yeah, okay.
a question for Matt because Matt talked
He's a
about
nerd.
how he thinks each of the Roger Moore movies are a response to what's popular in cinema at the time. So what is this one besides Jaws? Because I think that's like just a reference.
Well, and this
not a
was in
response.
production before Jaws had come out.
Right.
And been a huge hit, too. So.
So
They actually wanted Spielberg. He was like one of the candidates to direct this movie,
Yeah.
but he couldn't for whatever reason. He was making Close
I
Encounters.
think they decided that
He wasn't right or
what I heard
something.
is they decided he was untested and he had just made this movie that had all these problems that went way over budget, and then of course that came out and was Jaws and was a huge hit.
Yeah.
And so
I was thinking about this earlier, and this is the movie I struggle with the most. But there is something here. There is some like zeitgeist 70s thing that's going on here. And I think it's something having to do with that cartoonish like element that I was talking about earlier. And I'm trying to think of other movies from the
I thought
time.
it was gonna be like you were gonna say like because this actually has like an actual strong female character now. It was a response to some movie like that or something.
Yeah, well, also in the 70s they had a lot of like love story and like
Yeah.
love kind of like romantic comedy.
The
not even
genesis
comedy,
of,
just
like,
like romantic
romance movies or
movies were
something, yeah.
popular. Yeah, and I think just the title alone kind of like speaks to those moviegoers.
I think like I said, that their part of the plot is the strong part of the plot.
Mhm.
Like the Stromberg thing is just like, what the hell's going on here with this fishman? But them having first falling for each other, which is like, I mean, it's not very complicated in these James Bond movies. He seems to have some sort of thing that makes women want to have sex with him. But
his penis.
yeah, his
Oh.
large member.
I see. But then, she finds out he's the one who killed her ex-lover, and she's really mad about that. And that's a scene. That's just like a good like 5-minute one-on-one scene where they talk about it, and you see them both reacting to each other and all that stuff. And then the story continues. You continue to see them interact, and like, they save each other's lives and all this stuff. And then, of course, in the end, she decides not to kill him because she, is the spy who loved him or whatever. And like, that's the strong plot there. Not so much like there's a
feel
weird
like
fish man with a
That
nuke plan.
speaks to how good this movie is, because I feel like in a lesser Bond movie, you'd be bored at a scene like that, and you'd be like, okay, just get to the part where stuff blows up, But I think you're right; those scenes are strong in this movie, and it's interesting.
And all her costumes are good. In the scene where she finds out he killed her lover, she's wearing this like drapey, flowy thing that's like quite nice.
yeah.
Is it frills or furls?
It flows.
Are you saddened by the lack of Moneypenny in this movie?
Well, she is in there.
She did have a good appearance where basically her office is now
She's in a
in
little
some
pharaoh
pyramid.
Yeah, that becomes a gag.
was
But
pretty
she's
funny.
in about 2 scenes or 1 scene?
Only
She
shot
got
from
in
a
there, though.
distance.
Only shot from a distance. That's right.
Take it easy,
She has
right?
no close-ups in this movie.
Well,
That could be a Bond title.
Only shot from a
Only
distance.
shot from a
Only
distance.
shot from a distance. That's
Only
really cool.
shot from a distance.
Let's do the song.
Yeah, nice.
We should do that for an episode.
Only
Make
shot
our
from
own Bond
afar.
song.
Only shot from
We
a
all
distance.
try to sing like Shirley Bassey.
Only shot from afar.
Never shot from close up, because that's too damn close.
Oh my god! Write it down. Somebody write this down.
Only shot from a distance. Oh my god, that's great. I forget what we were saying.
I think we're just at the end.
We're
right?
going to get to
Yeah.
a 00 scale.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Theme song. We need a theme song
Yeah,
here.
got you. Why didn't? I mean, this is.
Well, I'm not saying for now, but like for eventually, we need to have like a little.
We'll just
Alright,
do
is
the
it-
regular Bond.
Well, so who's?
All right.
Okay, who's first?
I think I went first last time, so Harris, you want to take it away?
I wanted to go last because I wanted to measure my score based on what you overraters always do, because I'm the voice of reason in this group. I'm the one who
yeah, there we go.
I'm the one who makes sure that we don't rate everything a 9.5 or whatever by having sort of realistic ratings.
Would you say you're a regulator?
Yeah. Mount up.
You can go first then.
It's an 8.
Well, he's going to give it a 10.5.
No,
Well,
it's an
there's
8.
no money penny.
He gives shitty ones 9s.
It's an 8.
I don't have I forget what we ranked.
there's not
the
enough
other
money
ones.
penny, and Stromberg's a weird fish man, and Jaws and there's too much cartoony stuff, but it's a really strong, really good Bond movie. I could probably rate it higher, but I like Live and Let Die a little better. So to me, Live and Let Die is a 9. This one's an 8. It's a really strong 8. I'd say it's an 8, almost a 9.
I was gonna give it an 8 also. I mean, I'm torn. I almost want to give it a 9, but despite it having a lot of things that I love about Bond movies, and I really think it's well made and like it's got a lot going for it, it's hard for me to give it that close to a 10 because it's strange. Like all the elements are there, but maybe it's the test of time or something. Like
Also, the ending is the whole third act is like really stretched out by that having like multiple endings.
yeah, it did feel a bit long, the whole movie even. But there's just, I don't know, there's a lot going on. I mean, I know we're not giving halves, so for that, I have to step back to an 8.
Well, this is good. Because you guys both gave it an 8, I can give it what I originally planned on giving it and what I wrote down, which is a 9.
What?
Because I think this is really great. It's a little dated, it's a little corny, and Moore is never going to top Connery. But that having been said, start to finish, this was top notch. Like, this is what a Bond movie should be. It had all the elements. I enjoyed the hell out of this. And I just felt like it checked every box for me, so I could overlook the many valid flaws that you guys point out and give it. I never even rated any of the Connery movies a 9. This is the highest rating I've given something. But when I was looking back on it, I was like, it's just got everything, and it does everything really well. So I could nitpick, but I'm solid 9. I feel like we're giving it a pretty accurate score here.
It does have my favorite car. I really like that car. Turning into a submarine.
Maybe I'm going to change mine again. I changed it at the last second. It's got to be a 9. And I wanted to give it a 9 originally. I didn't because I thought
It's
going to
be our highest rated thing by far at this point, because we've never given something a score this high.
I mean,
So-
I would argue that this is my favorite one thus far.
Yeah, well, clearly it's mine. So
It's really good, man.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
like,
good, yeah.
Live and Let Die is
I give
really
most
good,
things
too.
that I like a 6. So this is kind of a departure for me.
This is fun. It's a fun
It is
movie.
a fun one. That's
It
the
might-
bottom line.
it
Is I
might be-
enjoyed the hell out of it.
I mean, to me, it might be one of maybe the best one that I've seen, but to me, I like Live and Let Die better, and so I can't
really
rate
like
it
Live
as
and
high.
Let Die too.
But
this
it's like
is-
it's a little subjective though. It's like kind of like it appeals to me.
So I guess
yeah.
not much question here. License to Watch.
Definitely. And I officially
Enthusiastically
changed my
issued.
vote to a 9.
All right.
Okay,
So
yeah, License to Watch
998.
for sure.
License
Yeah,
to Watch
definitely.
issued.
One of the best.
All right.
Would you like to do the
Oh yeah,
honors?
okay. So I'm gonna do this part too then.
Because you're so good at reading.
You're good at reading.
I can do it. I look at the paper and I see that there are shapes on it, and those shapes are letters.
The
and
more
they
you
make
explain it, the
words.
more it takes the magic out of it.
Right. So that's our show. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes and give us a shout out on social media. Or hit up our inbox at bondcastjamesbondcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe. Get your friends to subscribe and help us spread the word of Bond.
Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only.
No.
Moonraker. Oh, and we have one last thing. Taking us out.
Oh yeah, taking us out, we have a special guest
Submitter.
submission from a fan. We have fans.
Yep.
And
what's Tim's SoundCloud
His
handle again? Tim
SoundCloud
Got
is
Rhymes.
Tim Got Rhymes.
Tim Got Rhymes.
SoundCloud, that's Tim Got Rhymes.
Is that spelled any special way?
TIMGOTRHYMES.
So the usual way.
Special guest song.
So it's another remix of Nobody Does It Better by a special guest.
British agent in love with a Russian agent. Let's get out of these wet things.
But James, what would our superiors say?
Triple X.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Your time's running out, Stromberg. Here's to Mr. Money, and faster than you think. You shot your boat, Stromberg. Now it's my turn.
Maybe I misjudged Stromberg. Any man who drinks Dom Perignon 52 can't be all bad.